Hi, Maria. So I want to start first by discussing our goal here. So I think we're looking at what I really want you to be focusing on now is getting a publication out. And I'm thinking of a journal like Journal of Business and Technical Communication. And let's try to set a deadline uh, for getting that out and out to reviewers. That's a really good time to send things out because people tend to be free for reviewing over the summer, and that will set you up so that you can have a possible acceptance. Probably within 6 months of sending it out is a reasonable goal. Sometimes it might take longer depending on number of reviews. But this is the goal that we want to focus our attention on. Uh, because going out on the job market, you're just going to be so much stronger if you have a publication, a single author publication, and a major peer-reviewed journal. And then you already have things like the IEEE PC publication that will supplement it, but nothing is the same as something at a major peer-reviewed journal. So before you send it off, you're going to have to do obviously all the things, all the fill in the blank stuff. And I think you're at the point where you should be doing that. Let's flesh this out. And I think flesh it out before you send it to Chris so that she has all of the context for understanding things and she can read it similarly to what a reviewer will do and give you that kind of round of feedback. Now, as I'm reading this, I'm going through and I'm reading, uh, trying to read as if I don't know your project. And I'm skipping around and paying attention. So, as you know, from things we teach in the GCC, people often don't make it to the end of paragraphs. Topic sentences carry a lot of weight. So if I read this focusing on topic sentences, I get your introduction is on collaborative writing, and this is might want to rethink how you're starting this. This is a good sort of filler starter point for a draft, but I think maybe you want to get into the meat of the significance or the particular issue, something about conflict or feedback even earlier. All right. Then your next you bring our focus on feedback. Uh, so students can be resistant, particularly to giving feedback. So as someone who has expertise in this domain, and kind of read the next two sentences. All right, students aren't comfortable with giving feedback. And I kind of tend to skim them because I feel like I know this area. So then the next paragraph comes up. The discomfort arises when HP students do not feel that they are in the right position to be wielding decision-making power and offering that feedback. This comes a little bit out of the blue because I didn't really read the end of the previous paragraph carefully. So if we read just for the topic sentences, there's a big jump between this sentence and the topic sentence of the previous paragraph. And so I want you to kind of, as a way to double check how you're communicating to people, go through and read just the topic sentences and try to make the connections and fill in the blanks. So what I really think you need here is a topic sentence that's going to do the work of transitioning from feedback generally to feedback with HP or with proficiency, and introduce the issue of proficiency in a clear topic sentence. I also think in the introduction you should, this is an article that Kara Alexander and I wrote in JBTC in 2005. And this will really give you a lot of stuff to set up the broader landscape of students don't like to give feedback and don't like to teach each other. So, and especially this section, though throughout, there's all sorts of things. Students didn't read what their teammates had written, lots of issues. But this, in this section, no time to share skills, students kind of rejected the idea that they should be doing any kinds of teaching. Now, while we're focused on computer things, I think it applies to writing more generally. So right here we make the case that some of the learning, that students question the assumption that learning and teaching each other should even be part of it, and it should only happen if people request it. So I think that really kind of sets up for your particular contribution, and then say this is even more, this becomes even more of a conflict with HP and LP, different levels of proficiency. So foreground the issue of people not wanting to teach and not really wanting to give feedback. I believe Chris Lamb's recent article on collecting data and his intervention with giving data and feedback to the team leader. I think he also collects some scenarios that really kind of show that even when there is feedback, people don't want to act on it, that there's a general problem with avoiding confrontation that actually makes the confrontation worse. So I think with your contribution, you can do more to situate it within the broader problem and then bring in the HPLP as a specific instantation of this problem where things are even worse. I think this quote here does a good job introducing things. But again, as we move through here, I want you to really be thinking about topic sentences. A lot of times your topic sentences do a good job of introducing the topic. So this paragraph is on confidence about writing abilities, but it doesn't tell me what I should conclude about it. So it's just kind of a vague statement. And then as I read the next couple sentences here, it sounds like, oh, well, proficiency actually the proficiency differences are good because then HP students will give more feedback. I don't think that's what you want me to conclude from the paragraph. I think your main conclusion is that it's hindering their overall contribution. But I don't get that to the end, and I might not read to the end. So try to move up to the topic sentence and just imagine, chart out this introduction as if people are only going to read the first sentence of each paragraph, and make sure you are hitting all your milestones so that, and sometimes you can give yourself a second sentence in there, but really try to make sure that the flow, that the overall logic of your argument is clear from these topic sentences. This next one here, I think, does a good job of really kind of introducing the main argument of the paragraph. So try to make them look more like this one. And in this paragraph, I think I felt like the argument really got going. And this is the first place in here where I started to get really kind of interested and intrigued by the topic. And I think this is this motivation and intrigue is coming too late for most reviewers. Try to capture them earlier. So right here in this next paragraph, you're signaling that you're turning to filling the gap. And I think overall this is pretty good, except I expect once we get to filling the gap in the introduction, I expect this to happen rather quickly. And so we have a couple more paragraphs, which is longer than I'm expecting. So you might want to shorten this up a little bit. I also thought that this right here, this is really pointing towards significance, and I wondered if this should be in the very introduction of the piece. Now, looking at method, Obviously, this needs to be fleshed out. Go ahead and do it now. I think now's the time to do it before you send this to Chris. Because as I was reading the results, I was able to fill in the gaps because I've been involved in all three conversations on the project, but I think Chris will have some questions about things, and certainly reviewers will. And so we want to make sure that your discussion in the methods adequately answers all the questions that people are going to have as they read the review, or the results. I'm sorry. As I read the results section, my first question is, as I'm reading this heading, I'm wondering where the students are coming from, experienced by students, because you didn't actually interview students as part of this. And I think you're talking about like from prior research. But this raises a question automatically, uh, because I'm not sure where the comparison is coming from. And I'm wondering, as I scrolled through your results section, you were really, this is organized by challenges and then solutions. I'm wondering if that should just be your main headings. Challenges experienced by professionals, and then solutions. Now let me narrate my experience of the results here. So this one right here, mismanaging review processes. Now this kind of, I think this is a little too broad because it encompasses, you could characterize everything that you report on as mismanaging the review process. So now the example in this section, and really you're only providing one example here, which is this extended one from participant 17. And what I get from this example is timing. This is a big one. So I'm wondering if you should just make the heading timing and maybe provide another example of timing, or and then you mentioned in the review here not having steps. Should that be another one, or do you want to combine timing and communication norms or process norms together? But I think you should definitely have more than one example in the section and be a little more narrow about what you're discussing here. Next one, missing the mark on the deliverable seems to me more narrow. Good. And since this is 20 out of 20, should you begin with this and go from most broad to most common to least common? And maybe you should say missing the genre or unclear genre expectations. In this article, go ahead, you can use genre, just we don't want to do it in the handout with students. I think all of these really do fall under genre. So obviously not writing in the appropriate genre, not using expected standards, and not meeting expectations or established criteria for a well-written product. So here we could talk about genre as company genres. I'm wondering if all of this falls under the rubric, the heading of genre. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read all these quotes here for you and tell you ways, give you a different perspective on how they might be interpreted. So this first one from participant 13. So they gave him a section, they thought that would be enough, and then nobody could understand it. Now, right now, I don't know, is that nobody could understand it because of the grammar? This is in the section on genre, but it's not clear to me that the problem is genre. I think there's probably something later on from this quote that clarifies that. I'm wondering if this should be the first quote, though. So I'm raising little questions. This is not clear by itself that this is genre or expectations. It could be grammar. Okay. then this is not enough. That seems to be the main theme with these, that simply giving someone a section is not enough. Okay, now this, what really strikes me is that it was very, very off from the level of formality that we usually expect. This, I think, is the part that should be quoted, because this is a genre issue, the level of formality. Now, there are some places in here where so when I read something like this, for example, 9 out of 20 mentions situations, and even though the criteria was established, peers would show lapse. I'm expecting quotations right after this. If it seems like, I don't interpret this as summarizing what came above. And I think in general, in your results section, I think you still need some more quotations. These are some powerful ones. And so I want to emphasize, I'm really excited about the story you're telling. I think you need even more unpacking, more discussion of these. So there's still some room for some additional quotations here. I love this quote from participant 26. I think this one does a really good job of saying, really establishing, like, yeah, this is genre. People haven't seen an example of the quality. This maybe should be earlier in the section. I'm not sure, because for me, this is the one that speaks most clearly that the problem is we need to calibrate expectations, that the problem is one of genre. Now you end this section with a paragraph. The results show that failure to calibrate can create a ripple effect, but also in the quality of feedback. You don't provide any illustration in this ripple effect, which I take as the main point of this. And so I'm expecting some examples of how after receiving something, the quality of feedback goes down. But what you talk about next seems to be more of an uptake in the quality of feedback. So I'm a little bit confused about what point you're trying to make. If you're trying to show ripple effect, then we need some examples of it, and we need a little bit of elaboration of what that ripple effect is. This feels right here that you're introducing a new point, in which case I need some examples after it. If it's meant to be more summative, then that needs to be clear by referencing what came previously. Your next section on offending a peer who's resistant to learning. You actually start off this with face threatening. I think this is actually more accurate for this section, because not all of these are necessarily people who are resistant to learning. I think it's just fears about offending someone's or threatening someone's face. So go ahead and describe that. You probably want to provide a definition of a face in here. Go ahead and cite Brown and Levinson, which is what everybody cites. You don't have to go into a lot of depth here, but I do think a little bit of context would be good for that concept. Yeah, actually, as I read through here, you are focused on feedback and face. So make that the header of this section. This seems fairly intuitive to me, so I'm reading it less closely. I think it is appropriately placed as the last point, because it's the less exciting, but I absolutely think you need it. So this section is pretty good, except for the title, and I think you need to participants, these are, to keep it consistent. Now, when I see this heading here, I'm expecting, this sounds like you're moving into solutions, but actually the next couple paragraphs are really still, you're talking about problems. And table 1 here is not introduced, but this is a table on all of the rows here are about face loss. So I think this needs to be embedded with the section on face loss. I do like the format of the table. I think the table is very effective at summarizing some of the patterns you're seeing. Okay. And so the point that you're making is that face loss diminished over time. All right. Overall, I'm a little bit confused about the purpose of this situation, this section, excuse me. So what I see is the main thing is that these situations decreased in frequency, but I'd like you to go a little bit further and explain to me why that is, or give me some sort of explanation. Is it just that they got better at this? And then people commented on differences between professional and school expectations. This seems to me to be a different point. I see why there's a weak linkage, but if you're seeing a stronger linkage than that, I would like you to explain the linkage. And actually, even if it's a weak linkage, I want you to explicitly explain the linkage, because I'm having to infer it for myself here. So this section right here, I think needs some clarification, and I'm not entirely sure what point you're trying to make. Now, right here, you're transitioning into strategies. All right, this I totally expect. And then it seems like this section is going on into the strategies. I am wondering if the argument about 35% said that school was not good preparation. I'm wondering if you want to include that argument in here, because while it's interesting, okay, school didn't do a good job preparing them, it is only 35% that explicitly said that. Now, probably if you had asked them explicitly, more would have said it. But well, I see why the argument's relevant. I'm not sure it's that strong of a point. So consider whether you want it at all or not. Okay, so I'm looking through this section on calibration. I think it's very strong. This topic sentence here, oh, you even have a note, insert topic sentence here. So the topic sentence should focus on guidelines. So this participant uses institutional guidelines for style and refers to them before giving critique. Okay, with this last section here, I think I'm not quite sure that this is an accurate heading, because there's not a lot in here about building a culture so much as initiating a conversation. And what I kind of saw as the main point was initiating conversations that respect the writer's expertise and autonomy, or something, but not necessarily building an entire culture. Though I do agree that the culture would help. So I think this section still needs a little refinement to figure out what is the main takeaway lesson you want to convey. Now, one question I had here, out of the professionals in this study, those who were initially resistant to critique and feedback and change their attitude saw an improvement in the writing and collaborations. I don't recall anything that any quotes, any evidence of this from what you presented before. Most of this has been from the perspective of people who gave critique, but this sentence seems to be from the people who are receiving critique. So I'm not sure. Do you have some quotes from these people that you want to bring up? Um, so, because most of this seems to be advice for how to give critique to people. So I think this section still needs a little bit of work to really refine what it is that you are saying. I absolutely agree those students need to see some strategies for how to initiate these conversations. Uh, and let's see, I also saw in the problem section there were some issues with timing, that people just waited till too late in the to have a conversation, and so they just ended up implementing changes. Uh, so maybe that needs to be brought up in this section here. Overall, I think you have great points here. I think that this still needs to be fleshed out and some refinement in the results section of what exactly you're you want the main takeaway messages to be. I think by the time it's fleshed out, this is going to be a lot longer. Right now, I think this is ending up on page 15. You're going to go a few more pages in here. And so that's going to affect how much we want to include in the discussion section. So I'm going to pause here.